Yes, welcome to the No State Project here on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network, and only on LRN.FM today. I'm sorry, but major tech issue, and so we're doing it the way, old school, the way we used to do it. It's just going to be audio today, no YouTube stream. Hopefully we get things straightened out soon, and we get back in the saddle and start doing that again. But the podcast will be posted today, commercial free, with just audio only on my YouTube channel, No State Project. But glad to be with you here for what day is it? It's starting to bleed into each other. August. Wow. What's on my mind? April 6th, 2019. And glad to be with you here. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the continued support of the show. This show is continuously brought to you by the generosity of Chris in California. There's also Don and Dan and Bill in New Hampshire. Nelson and Eyal do appreciate the support. If you'd like to be able to help support the show, and it is very appreciated and needed, you can do that at markstevens.cells.com. That's markstevens.cells.com. And also just go to my website, markstevens.net. And hey, if you are being attacked by a bureaucrat or you just want to learn how to more effectively defend yourself against bureaucratic attacks, then check out markstevens.net. We have a ton of information also available, templates and scripts for helping to prepare for court or an administrative, and all around just better able to confront people with their BS and be able to spot and take apart bad arguments. And so we're trying to limit the damage that these people want to do to us. And we're talking about anarchy, government, and government abuse. And of course, anarchy meaning no rulers. That's from the literal translation from the Greek, no rulers. Not no rules. We believe here that as anarchists that the rule of do no harm, live honestly, injure no one, give every man his due, should apply to and it does apply to everybody, although there's an awful lot of people that are not held accountable for the harm that they cause other people because they have granted themselves immunity. And we want to work towards getting to a voluntary society where the rules apply to everybody. That you don't get to just call yourself honorable and you suddenly are, but it's your actions and the way you behave, the way we treat others. It's that is what determines if you're honorable, not because you have to give the fact that you have to give yourself the title is kind of an indication that it's probably not deserved. Probably not. Sure that nobody would accept if I just started putting, how stupid it would be if I just started calling myself the Honorable Mark Stevens and I wanted to be called that. Well, people would rightfully see that that is ridiculous. That's stupid. But unfortunately, people do, they accept it. So what I talk about all the time, of course, and we'll be talking about this, during the show, the rules don't apply because those co-government who force entire communities to give them money, force them to, force us to pay them, they still have a mystique about them. People, and unfortunately, still a majority of people still believe that they have a moral right to do what is immoral. Now, if anyone disagrees with that characterization, you're more than welcome to call the show and set me straight. The number is 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign, or 2020 with the hashtag, and that'll get you into the big show, and you can show me where that's not the case, because from what I see, it seems pretty reasonable, and maybe I'm guilty of oversimplifying it. I know that somebody left a comment the other day that I'm making it too simplistic, and and then somebody, and then in the same token, I'm trying to take a simple concept like jurisdiction and make it far more complicated than it really is. And I've never seen where that's the case. Jurisdiction is based simply on if you're physically in Arizona, then the laws apply. I mean, I even have bureaucrats who unanimously Yeah, that's true. That's how jurisdiction is supposed to work. If you accept it at face value, which, of course, as a skeptic, I don't believe that we should be accepting anything at face value just because somebody says so. So that's where the problems come in. But this idea that they're not responsible. So we have bureaucrats who have given themselves immunity. They gave themselves immunity, especially when you look at prosecutors and judges, which are just lawyers. That lawyers have given themselves absolute immunity to commit horrific acts of violence against others, and the victims can't, or even their family, generally cannot hold them accountable. Yes, I know that for a judge or prosecutor, if they never had jurisdiction, then there is no absolute immunity. There's no immunity. But in practical terms, see, it doesn't matter what the laws say. The laws say a lot of really good things, but the laws don't apply to everybody. That's what I've been saying practically every show in the last few months, and we're going to go into this again today. Because, oh my gosh, I want to thank Rob I believe he's in Washington, and I also appreciate his continued support of the show, for sending me this news article. It's kqed.org, kqed.org. And it's California, and so a Darwin Bond Graham is reporting here, Fremont destroyed decades of police misconduct records shortly before transparency law took effect. Yeah. Oh, it's just a few bad apples. You can't sit there and say that the whole bunch is corrupt. It's just a few bad apples. The cops are good, and all those people saying all cops are bastards, they're the real bastards. I tell you what, they're the real bastards. Not all. Here you have an entire department. It looks like it is policy to destroy decades of police misconduct records. It's already extremely difficult to get Brady information in California. The lengths, and I'm not going to, and I got to be fair here, of course. I'm not saying that it doesn't frustrate even prosecutors, because if I've seen reported where some prosecutors are very upset because they need to know if the police is the police officer who's supposed to be a witness. They need to know because some of them actually take the ethics responsibilities and, obligations seriously. So prosecutors, especially if they're in a very high profile, at least if they're in a high profile case, need to be able to know in advance, especially because Brady requires it, they need to know. So even if they want to screw the defense, the prosecutor probably doesn't want to be embarrassed and wants to know if the police officer, and he probably has an idea of what kind of cop it is, they need to know. Is this a competent witness? Is there something going from this officer's background, like what happened in the OJ trial? Is there something that in the officer's background that could be used to attack his competence and credibility that I need to know about? And even prosecutors have an extremely difficult time getting Brady material. So, given that Brady violations, and prosecutorial misconduct and police misconduct is at, epidemic levels, although it's only been reported that prosecutorial misconduct is at epidemic levels. It's pretty easy to see on YouTube. That's more open and reported as opposed to prosecutorial misconduct, which is not nearly reported, and it's not something you can necessarily see in a YouTube video that someone took with their phone. But the legislature, these people trying to rectify that, and before the law takes effect, what does the police department do in Fremont? They destroyed the records. This is not a few bad apples, people. You're talking about the whole. Then that's the thing. You finish the few bad apples spoils the bunch. The whole thing is rotten. But we'll be back here on the No State Project in just a few moments. You want to join me? It's 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 and the pound sign. Just welcome back to the No State Project here on LRN.FM. And the number to join me on the big show is 218-632-9399. 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 and the pound sign. And you can also, I can get you connected on Skype also. You can instant message me first on Skype at Frank Rizzo 3. That's Frank Rizzo with the number 3 and get you into the queue. So what I'm talking about here is just another example of police abuse and where not a damn thing is going to be done. Nothing. Fremont, so the headline is Fremont destroyed decades of police misconduct records shortly before transparency law took effect. You would think that there would be a lot of indictments against the police responsible for this for obstruction. But there won't be. There won't be. I think everybody responsible should spend, at least a decade in prison because, hey, if I had done something like that, if I had done something even remotely close, they would be prosecuting me. My gosh, if you don't have a damn seatbelt on, they prosecute you like it's like your lives depend on it. So let's not kid anybody. So last year, while state lawmakers were considering a landmark bill to open up previously confidential police misconduct reports to the public, the city of Fremont quietly destroyed a large archive of papers, cassettes, and computer files documenting over 4 decades of internal affairs investigations and citizen complaints. It is not known if the destroyed records covered officer-involved shootings. Wow. Now, you can say, well, Mark, there has to be intent. There's got to be mens rea. They have to, have evil intent. Well, I think the circumstantial evidence is pretty damning here. While they were working on a bill to open up confidential police misconduct records to the public, they destroyed them. So, how else can that be perceived? It was just something, it was a coincidence? Really? Let's use the same damn method of judgment that they use against us. Shall we? Does anyone think for a second that if there was knowledge that you were going to be subpoenaed by the IRS, that you went and destroyed 10 years before they issued it, but you know it's coming. You destroy 10 years of financial records. Do you think for a second that they would not hold you accountable so fast it would make your head spin? Huh? Does anyone doubt that for a second? That's because there's 2 sets of rules. Nothing. Last fall, Fremont City's council also changed the police department's records retention policy, reducing the amount of time that investigative files of officer-involved shootings must be saved from 25 years to 10. Fremont City Manager, City Attorney, Mayor, and Police Department did not respond to emails and phone calls seeking comment for this story. Really, there's a shock. There's no evidence Fremont violated any state laws or its own policies, but few other Bay Area cities have been as aggressive in purging police files. But some find the city's actions troubling. Well, I think everybody should, unless you have a vested interest in keeping those things hidden. Why is it, in the first place, that when you and I are arrested, and you're supposed to be presumed innocent, at least the court has to do that, the juries, not necessarily the police or the prosecutors, but your face gets plastered publicly. That is permanent. So even if you are fully vindicated, there is a permanent record that you were charged. Permanent. At least publicly, there's no getting rid of it. It's there. It's done. End of discussion. But when police are involved in misconduct, we're not permitted to know about it. Now, I'm not saying this is everywhere, but this is pretty bad in California. That police misconduct and the complaints against them are confidential. Why? What logical... If it's okay for us... Now, let's even look at another job. If you did something on your job, it's a matter now of a permanent record. doesn't get hidden. But police, prosecutor, it's a different set of rules. The rules that apply to us do not apply to them. They have a moral right to be immoral, and they can do things like this. It didn't violate state law or policy to destroy the records. Well, isn't there a policy, or isn't it that those records, if you can show in court, under Brady, that there's exculpatory information and evidence? It violates Brady right there. How many Brady violations are there now? Because now the information has been destroyed. How many potential Brady violations are there now because the information has been literally destroyed? Oh, but the rules, they didn't violate any policy. Really? Maybe the guy writing this is just too, bought into the system. This reporter doesn't ask enough questions. Well, he did. He did ask for a response from them, but they didn't return any phone calls and they didn't comment on the story. But to say that there's no evidence they violated state laws or their own policies to destroy records of misconduct? No, I'm gonna have to go ahead and disagree with you there, and I'm going to say, yeah, you're violating Brady and due process because a defendant may be entitled to that. Fremont's decision is problematic because the legislature made a decision. They made specific findings that transparency around police shootings, uses of force, and incidents of serious misconduct is necessary to building public trust, said Peter Berbring, Director of Police Practices for the ACLU of California. The lawmakers passed SB 1421 in August. The law allows public access to previously confidential public records about use of force incidents resulting in great bodily harm in confirmed cases of sexual assault or dishonesty by an officer. Governor Jerry Brown signed the bill into law in September. By then, Fremont had purged decades of information. We're talking dishonesty by a police officer? Why would that, again, if the system is supposed to be legitimate, why in the world would cases of official misconduct where the police officer was dishonesty and he has a history, forget about the defendants for a second. Why should this information be hidden from prosecutors? Let's give them the benefit there, right? Let's try to be as fair as possible. The prosecution is entitled to that information also. So we'll continue with this and finish this story, but if in the next segment or so, you can join me at 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign, and Skype is Frank Rizzo 3, but instant message me first. So welcome back. You're listening to the No State Project live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network. Glad to be with you here. Our website, markstevens.net. You want to help support the show, it's markstevens.cells.com, or my website, of course, markstevens.net. Another way you can help support the show and help get towards a voluntary society is confront a sitting city council. You don't have to have something like this going on, like in Fremont, the crap that they pulled over there, but just confront them. If I was to do things like you guys, the state government, all right, and I was to force strangers in my community to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? Also, I know you guys operate on the presumption that if I'm physically in California, that your laws apply to me. You have any proof that that's true? Any proof? Anyway, you want to join me on the big show, it's 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign. And Skype is Frank Rizzo 3, but please, instant message me first. So we're getting back to this Fremont, the city of Fremont, what they decided with these people. There is no city, it's just people. They decided ahead of the passing of a state law, they destroyed all their confidential police records about the use of force, resulting in bodily harm and cases of sexual assault or dishonesty by an officer. Imagine that. Having a job where it's confidential if you're dishonest. Wow. Wow. Confidential if you're dishonest or engaged in sexual assault. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Between June and 2018, Fremont destroyed 6 batches of records covering investigations of police misconduct, citizen complaints, and disciplinary files spanning 1971 to 2016. It's unclear what specific information was contained in the files that Fremont destroyed. The contents of most of the files identified on several lists obtained by KQED through a public record request were not described in detail. But certificates of destruction, which Fremont requires every whenever a city record is purged, reveal that some recent cases involve investigations of officers for dereliction of duty, arrest by other agencies, and misuse of police equipment. You see, take us, please, totally out of the damn picture here. Okay? Just take us out. We're not even an issue here. Listen to that. This was cases involving investigations of officers for dereliction of duty, which is not, that's going to be a department complaint most of the time. And here's a big one: arrest by other agencies. Arrest by other agencies. Can you imagine that? The police officer against you may be so dishonest he was arrested by another agency. Let's say another police agency. And that is destroyed. Why? Why are they destroying that? If it vindicated the police officer, if all of these complaints, citizen complaints, Mark, citizens, they're a-holes, they just hate the police. And but if the investigations vindicated them, why wouldn't they want it released? See, it's something playing out right now in Washington, D.C. with the Mueller report. And you've had 5 times. In the last one, it was Rand Paul, who has a history of being in Moscow and hand-delivered a letter from Trump to Putin. He hand-delivered a letter to Putin, blocked for the 5th time the release of the Mueller report to Congress. To Congress. Even if you would just my gosh. So if it really did exonerate the police officer, why would they destroy it? Why would there be mass destruction there? Arrested by other agencies. And that is, oh my gosh, the corruption is so brazen and in your face. And nothing is done. Again, it is against the law to destroy evidence and Brady material. This is Brady material. One destroyed file was for a 2012 investigation into allegations that an officer targeted a person and carried out a false arrest. The officer was exonerated according to a 1-sentence description on the file. Therefore, it's unlikely its contents would have been subject to disclosure under SB 1421. So they were just getting rid of all of them. All of them. I guess it was the manner in which they were exonerated. Sort of like what you have, again, playing out with Captain Bonespur right now. His campaign manager, in court documents by his own lawyers failing to redact it, his campaign manager was giving, this is fact, giving polling data to a Russian oligarch, someone involved with Russian intelligence. And yet they still say exonerate. So it could be the same thing here. Of course, the police are always exonerated. They shoot somebody unarmed, and they're always exonerated. The police exonerate themselves. Well, we've conducted a thorough investigation of ourselves, and we found that we did nothing wrong. I mean, that's a meme at this point. Nothing new for my show. We hear this stuff all the time. However, brief descriptions of several other destroyed case records show that some officers were disciplined for misconduct, including multiple terminations. One destroyed record of a 2006 to 2008 investigation resulted in 11 orders to impose discipline against a police officer. Now, again, For those who are new to the show, Brady material includes all exculpatory material evidence that is exculpatory, that shows that you're innocent. All information that goes to impeach a witness against you. If you have a police officer that has been disciplined for misconduct, you as a defendant are entitled to know that. The prosecution is required to know that. However, in California, they do run interference, and they make it extremely difficult even for the prosecutors. Okay? So how can you have a fair trial in California, especially when you're talking about a place here in Fremont? You're supposedly entitled to a fair trial. So you have to have a fair trial, you have to be able to gauge whether the witness against you is competent and credible. If they are willfully and knowingly withholding that evidence from you because they've destroyed it or for some other reason, then you are being denied a fair trial. How many people are sitting in prison right now in California because of problems with Brady disclosure, where they don't give it because the police unions fight so hard? The police who are willing to shoot you dead for their system, although I'm sure a lot of them do it just because they want to, just because they're sick, twisted, perverse individuals. You imagine finding out, and how do you find out? But imagine in those cases where somebody is sitting in prison and they find out that the police officer was disciplined for misconduct, that there were 11 orders, multiple orders to discipline that police officer. And in California, the prosecutor may not even have known that. So even if they're not giving a damn about us, my gosh, look what they're doing to the prosecutor. Well, again, it takes someone like Krasner up in Philadelphia to actually give a damn about something like that. One category of records of Fremont destroyed last year included audio recordings and paper documents related to various internal affairs investigations and termination proceedings for police officers from 1973 to 2005. I'll finish this on the other side. If you want to join me after the break, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign. And Skype is Frank Rizzo 3, but always instant message me first. And we'll be back in just a moment, so don't go away. We're back here on the No State Project, and I'm your host, Mark Stevens, coming to you live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona. Because when you're an anarchist or someone who questions the legitimacy of government, you don't live in a house, you live in a fortified compound. But I'm glad to be with you here today. The number 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign. And Skype is Frank Rizzo 3, talking about some employees there in the city of Fremont, California, destroying all their records, up to, I guess, 40 years worth of records, and more than 40 years. And so, because they were passing a law making these records available to the public, so they before the law was passed, they destroyed everything. So what I was saying was that one category of records Fremont destroyed last year included audio recordings and paper documents related to various internal affairs investigations and termination proceedings for police officers from 1973 to 2005. Another file included numerous documents regarding an officer's policy violations and discipline from 1971 and 1975. A 1986 case that was destroyed concerned one officer who was surreptitiously recording other employees. Wow. I mean, I could see 1971 and 75, even 1986, since it's 33 years ago. But they were terminating and they destroyed records up that were from 73 to 2005 to 2005. Not that long ago. A lot of those cops are, if there was a disciplinary record in 2005, I'm sure there's still those cops are still working there or at other agencies. The city also destroyed 11 boxes of training review board files that included information about about officer-involved shootings and other serious incidents that occurred between 2003 and 2015. A training review board is convened as the first step towards investigating in-custody deaths and similar incidents. If the board discovers policy violations by officers, they refer the case to Internal Affairs for further investigation. It's unclear if any of the destroyed files resulted in full IA investigation. Since 2012, Fremont police have been involved in 8 fatal shootings, according to data maintained by the State Department of Justice. Wow. Officer-involved shootings and other serious incidents, including in-custody deaths between 2003 and 2015, destroyed. Now, come on. If these... how much... This stuff plays out right in... Now, the Fremont thing I didn't know about until a few days ago when Rob sent it to me. And so it flies under the radar sometimes. It's not like what's going on right now, which is, headline news, 24/7, about cover-ups and whatnot, not releasing, reports, not releasing evidence. This is just par for the course, I guess, for California. Wow. Yeah, the police are, and the city manager and the city attorney, they're upstanding. You see, here I'm going to bat for prosecutors, and the city attorney was involved. So, yeah, I'm sure that, yeah. They want to, because the typical prosecutor like Stephen Myrie, misconduct is their bread and butter. That's how they get prosecutions. That's how they get convictions, rather. Okay, it's prosecute and win at any cost, even when you withhold evidence, which is why we have prosecutorial misconduct at epidemic levels in the United States. Police unions lobbied intensely against State Bill 1421, authored by State Senator Nancy Skinner, who's a Democrat in Berkeley. Earlier this year, in a last-ditch effort to prevent the law from applying to records created before the statute took effect on January 1st, police unions sued to stop officers' employers from making records public. Unbelievably, so far the unions have lost in the courts. Wow. I gotta say, I'm a little surprised there. On March 12th, the state appeals court rejected arguments from unions representing officers employed by Walnut Creek, Antioch, Concord, Martinez, Richmond, and the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office that the law shouldn't be retroactively applied. Fremont's police officers union didn't file a similar lawsuit. Well, they had destroyed everything. Why would they have to? It doesn't have to. If they don't have it, it doesn't have. Who cares that it applies retroactively? Well, we destroyed it all. Oh, okay. So you don't have to comply with the law. But I see Antioch is on here. And Antioch is famous, at least to listeners of the No State Project, because we all know, and should know, especially long-time listeners, that Antioch, Salza versus City of Antioch is where I got the quote that the Court of Appeals in California, and this has not been overturned, this was not reviewed, it's been 20 years, police officers have no statutory duty to do anything. That is a direct quote. I don't think I even got a word wrong there. So, yeah. So, again, why are the police unions fighting to have the police officers' records public? If it didn't involve prosecutions, then maybe you got a leg to stand on, right? There's a privacy issue. I get, can all understand that. The thing is, they are interacting with us every day. That's what they do. They are hurting us every day. We are I think we're like 1,000 times more likely, or, let's say 100 times more likely to be killed or hurt by a police officer than by a terrorist. So I guess we could just say that they're domestic terrorists because, they're using physical force and threats of physical force to bring about political means. So, given the fact that we are forced to interact with these dangerous individuals, and given the nature of the court system in Brady, we are entitled to know this. There is no valid reason to hide this information, but the police unions spend probably millions of dollars lobbying against this, and even more millions of dollars fighting this in court. And at least the courts so far, according to this article, which was from a few weeks ago, at least the courts are not letting them get away with it. they're getting away with destroying all the records. They'll get away with that. But the courts are not striking down the law. A few other cities have also tried to purge their police misconduct records. Last year, Inglewood, oh good lord, Inglewood voted to approve the destruction of more than 100 police misconduct investigation files. Long Beach also destroyed years' worth of records before SB 1421 took effect. See, this is a common thing. My gosh, it's not just Fremont. Both cities said the move to purge documents was unrelated to the new law. Wow, what a coincidence. Does anyone think for a second that the cops or the prosecutors and judges there would take that excuse from us? Huh? Do you really? Again, let's say they wanted to subpoena our books and records. They said, look, we are working on going to court. Okay, let's say Long Beach prosecutors and police. We are working in the courts right now to get a subpoena for your books and records. Oh, really? Okay. And then I destroy them. And they come looking for the books and records that they're all gone. I destroyed them. Had nothing to do with the fact that you said you were issuing a warrant or a subpoena. Completely unrelated. Do you think anyone, unless only an idiot would buy something like that. But the police, they think that we're all stupid, so they say, and look, bottom line is, why do they say stupid things like this? Because they can, because no one is going to hold them accountable for it, because they are just men and women forcing us to give the money. Both cities said the move to purge documents was unrelated to the new law. Really? No kidding. Wow. Yeah. Oh, that's right. And the reporter who uncovered the Panama Papers, the fact that she was murdered, well, had nothing to do with what she reported on. Gary Webb, 2 bullets in the back of the head, had nothing to do with the story he reported about exposing the CIA. Putting crack on the streets, cocaine. Oh, no, they were completely unrelated. Completely unrelated. Wow. Oh, my gosh. Civil rights and police accountability groups criticize these moves as a means of subverting the law's intent and ensuring the records can never be made. Oh, of course. In nearby Hayward, Police Officers Association lobbied their department's chief and executive team to change their records retention policy so that misconduct and use of false records could be purged faster. The effort was directly in response to SB 1421, according to notes from a December meeting between the police union and the Hayward police officials that KQED obtained through a public record request. Good Lord. Par for the course. That's government. When you think you have a moral right to be immoral, this is what you get. We'll be back here after the top of the hour break. You want to join me here on the big show, 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. Yes, welcome back to the No State Project at the start of the second of 3 hours of Anarchy Radio right here on the Liberty Radio Network, LRN.FM. And unfortunately not streaming live as usual on my YouTube channel. Hopefully we can get back to that. But the Wednesday show, commercial free, will, of course, go, no problem. Hopefully the next Saturday we'll be able to get this broadcast back on the YouTube. But anyway, you want to join me, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. Passcode is 2020 with a pound sign. And Skype is Frank Rizzo 3, but always instant message me first. And talking about the Fremont and other police departments in California destroying records of police misconduct and investigations. And actually, there was the Hayward police, even though I was mentioned before that they were lobbying to change the retention policy so misconduct and use of force records could be purged faster. And it was shown with evidence obtained by the reporting website here, KQED. The police chief decided not to go ahead. He said, he's quoted here saying, "In the support of transparency, I decided it was not appropriate or necessary, and I took no further action to pursue any changes," Hayward Police Chief Mark Collar wrote in an email. So that, some of them still have a little bit of a sense of right and wrong. I mean, imagine, look, that's why I live honestly, injure no one, give every man his due. treat those the way you want to be treated. I mean, do you seriously want an organization that has such control and influence in the community to have bad apples be protected? That's all they're doing, is protecting the so-called bad apples. So when people who see nothing wrong with government and think it's a legitimate organization, you say, well, look, if it really is just a few bad apples, then why wouldn't you want them rooted out? Why wouldn't you want to get rid of them instead of having them spoil the whole barrel, like obviously has happened? So, there's a new thing. The old line was, hey, we've investigated ourselves and we found no wrongdoing. And I think we can update that by saying, look, we've investigating ourselves, and we found no records of any wrongdoing. Because you destroyed them. In a single city council meeting last November, that's November of 2018, Fremont reduced the stringency of its retention rules so that fewer police misconduct records would be subject to disclosure. While state law requires police agencies to maintain records of citizen complaints or resulting investigations of officers for 5 years, Fremont has interpreted the statute to allow for the destruction of internal affairs investigations after only 2 years if the department started the investigation on its own. How bad does it have to be in the first place if the internal affairs, if the department starts the investigation? It's not because of a victim's complaint. Wow. The changes were listed in the City Council's consent calendar, a list of agenda items that are routinely considered routine, a list of agenda items that are typically considered routine and pass with little discussion. The Council also voted to reduce the amount of time the city retains records about police vehicle pursuits and vehicle accidents from 5 to 3 years. Wow. It also struck language requiring the police department to indefinitely retain records relating to charges of discrimination and sexual harassment. The new requirement is only 5 years. So, again, we've investigated ourselves for investigating ourselves, and we found that there is no record of any wrongdoing. That's it. And this is how you get promoted. And it's not even exclusive to government types. That is, you see that play out. I know someone, some family where they're in a situation where a coworker had fallen asleep on the job, and was witnessed, was reported to the manager, who said, and again, this is supposed to be immediate termination. But it turns out that this employee bragging about having management in their back pocket wasn't bluffing. So what happened, even though when a complaint was filed, and they're encouraged, if you see something, to make sure to complain about it, because people's lives are at stake, literally. All management did was punish the whistleblowers. And, so the management, the people who stick together. Look, I was in the Army. I've seen this firsthand. I know other people that have seen it firsthand. I know, in fact, a good friend of mine was a sheriff's deputy for 30 years with Joe Arpaio. I know firsthand what happens. His wife, who was also a sheriff's deputy, blew the whistle on the bingos. And the bingo was called that because when you have 5 charges that you can give on an Arizona traffic ticket. And a bingo was when you would find any reason to fill that up. And so there was competition to see who can get the most bingos. Well, this seemed dishonest, to say the least, and this individual blew the whistle. Well, she was pulled off the street and given a pretty crappy job with the intent that she would probably quit because it was so bad. And so here, I would say that if you look at the people that are doing this, you will see a record of failing upwards, where those who keep their mouth shut get the promotions. You have to keep your mouth shut and don't make waves. That's what you do. I saw, again, firsthand when I was in the military, anybody who opened up their mouth was singled out. It's the way it is. You got to stick by your own, so to speak, right? The blue line of silence. That's what you got going on here. covering up police. See, if they had any concern for right and wrong, even for their laws, which they don't, they would not be trying to hide it. They would want these investigations that have shown that there was serious misconduct. They would want that to be made public so that those officers could get off the force. They could be held accountable. They're not interested in enforcing the law. City of Antioch, Salza versus the City of Antioch. Police officers have no statutory duty to do anything. They do have a duty to enforce the law. Really? Do they have a duty to enforce the law against themselves? Apparently not. The laws don't apply to them. That's why it's so rare that these people are held accountable for anything. Anything. So, but the thing is, in California, it is so restrictive on the Brady material. It's not like Arizona. It's not like a lot of other places where there's an open file policy. California, you actually have to have you have to be able to present solid evidence. Unlike the prosecution, when they charge you with a code violation, you have to show solid evidence as to why you are entitled to see that police officer's file, his disciplinary records. And that's not an easy thing to do. You have to show that there's evidence in the file. Not just because you have evidence he beat the living hell out of you in a drunken rage on Saturday. What's in the file that is exculpatory? How do you prove that there's exculpatory material in the file if you can't see it? See, this is not the same as the prosecution knowing and not disclosing it to you. See, they hide it from the prosecutor. These people are vile, perverse, horrible people. This is institutional. This is what happens when it is accepted that a small group of people in society have a moral right to do what is immoral. What you and I would go to jail for, they can do as a regular course of their business. That is their business model. They cannot survive unless they are being immoral and unethical. And that's what's so perverse about it. People still believe and see them as some kind of moral authority. Really? Really? You gotta examine that again, buddy. How is forcing a community to give you money moral? How is that ethical in any sense? But we'll be back in the next segment with your calls. It's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. Yes, welcome back to the No Stay Project here on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network. And we'll be live back on my YouTube channel on Wednesday for the commercial-free broadcast. But this podcast will be up commercial-free on my YouTube channel today. It should be today. So whatever somebody may miss, you can get it there. And if you want to join me, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020. With the pound sign. So you can also get me on Skype at FrankRizzo3. But instant message me first, of course. I wish that this particular story was just, an aberration. But unfortunately, these kind of things are very common. And I was thinking during the break, maybe I was making a mistake. Maybe this isn't the police against the prosecutors. Maybe, at least in California, is what we're reporting here, is that the prosecutors are behind this. Because if you can't find out because the records are destroyed, or the police union is allegedly so strong that they can block even prosecutors from seeing the police files, then they have a legal excuse not to comply with Brady. Hey, I can only give you what I'm legally responsible to give you. And if legally I cannot get those files, I can't give you, so maybe I wouldn't doubt, since the city attorney is involved with the Fremont situation, I wouldn't doubt for a second that the prosecutors are the ones behind a big push to block the transparency, because now they don't have to, it's even It's even, they got an out. I can't give you what I'm not entitled to legally. Again, you have to have actual evidence that there's evidence of misconduct in the file. And if they're confidential and you can't get them, what do? The only thing that somebody can do is, maybe if there is part of a newspaper where they dedicate a section just to keeping track of police officers in court and compiling a public record where the police officer has been dishonest, and then that may be considered sufficient evidence of a pattern of abuse from the police officer, so that you can get into his file if you're charged by that police officer. That's a massive undertaking, to be able to keep track of all these court proceedings. You'd actually have to be there, and to witness this. It would require people sitting in court. This is why it's so important to have these documents, publicly available, because who could possibly dedicate the time, money, and effort to keeping track of all these police prosecutions? Well, when they're the witnesses, these code violation prosecutions, and to be able to compile an independent public, record that people could see and have published. Oh, here are the Brady cops. Out here in Arizona, I know a prosecutor, and he says they have Brady lists. They have cops that are on Brady lists. And at least this prosecutor, when prosecuting somebody, won't use that police officer, and he won't prosecute if that's the only police officer, because you can't take a prosecution to trial with a Brady cop. I mean, come on. But there's guys like him are few and far between. He's like a Larry Krasner in Philly. They're the exception. They're the exception, but at least it's encouraging. I hear they have Brady lists. Cops that you should not rely on. For those 1% of prosecutors that actually give a damn about being fair. This is why the ruling class has to be gutted. It has to be stricken out. This is what happens. I wrote about this in Government Indicted. There's a psychological impact to being given irresponsible control over someone's life, where you can literally kill them and not be held accountable for it. I mean, talk about an adrenaline rush. But an adrenaline rush, you're not going to be held accountable. You know that you're not going to be prosecuted. You know that everybody else is neck deep in corruption like you are, and no one's going to blow the whistle. And that if someone, by some chance, does actually blow the whistle, that their careers are going to be destroyed. They're the ones that are going to be isolated and probably pushed off the force. They're not the ones that get promoted. Somebody send me a story of a whistleblower that got promoted. That would make for some very good reading. I'm sure that's not a 12-inch, a 10-inch book. If anything, it would be more like a pamphlet. It doesn't happen. Being a whistleblower takes guts, because you gotta know that you are finished. Finished. There's no way, because even if you go to a different department, they know what you did, and people don't generally care. All they know is that I've got a snitch. We've got somebody who sticks by the rules. We've got somebody here who thinks the rules apply to everybody. And that doesn't work out too well. That's why you have to have laws, protections for whistleblowers, but they're a joke. There are creative ways that they can use to retaliate against you. It's so similar, like this family member I'm talking about today that went to management and they retaliated. What they did is similar to what they did in Fremont by destroying the records. What they did was they stuck to policy and drastically changed the way the office ran to cater to the bad seed, to the ones who were falling asleep and the ones who were violating, the company policy. They radically changed the way the office operated to cater to them. And they can say this had nothing to do with the complaint. Nothing. It was a coincidence that we radically altered the way the office operates after the complaint. Total coincidence. Well, they do the same thing here. Management. That's the thing. Management always tends to be scumbags. They usually tend to be scumbags. And so what happens when you get a good manager who wants to do something? Well, are they going to risk their family? Are they going to risk their jobs? Because they're going to blow the whistle on the management? That's why sometimes HR, well, our hands are tied. There's nothing we can do. The CFO won't allow it. The top guy, or upper manager, they won't allow it. They'll override us. So like what happened recently with the Trump administration, with 25 applications for security clearance were denied, and they were summarily reversed with no explanation given whatsoever. So that's when the latest federal whistle blows. Yeah, management tends to be corrupt to the core because you got to keep your mouth shut and turn a blind eye, and they're the ones that are favored. They're the ones that become managers because they keep their mouth shut. And we'll be back with your calls and more in just a few moments here on the No State Project. 218-632-9399 is the number. Welcome back to the No State Project. It's 218-632-9399. It's the number. The passcode is 2020 and a pound sign if you want to join me on the show. Also, Skype is Frank Rizzo 3. Instant messaging me first. And I don't know why this stuff keeps coming up on my videos. I guess it always bears repeating. I just it's almost as if I don't know. I say it's about anarchy, government abuse, and defending yourself in court. I'm pretty straightforward with that. We talk about anarchy every time on the show. It's always been a very consistent message. Similar like what Ernie Hancock would say: freedom good, government bad, 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 bad. And I recommend being a skeptic to critically analyze any claim, whether it's from me or anyone else. It doesn't matter. Critically analyze. Don't just accept it as true just because someone said so. Well, someone told me. I heard. Well, it sounded good. Well, does it pass the test? Remember that which can be asserted without evidence, it can be dismissed without evidence. It's not a matter of, well, prove me wrong. No, you have to actually make an effort and prove that what you're saying is true before the burden shifts to me to disprove it. That's just not how it works. We're not going to accept these claims from government and about government. We're going to accept them on like a religious type of faith. Well, Mark, you have to believe, and then if you believe, then you'll have a test of your faith, and then you'll see the truth. That's not how things work in the real world. And I'm going to talk about this in a few moments or a few minutes. I got to tell you, any time you are in a discussion on government, okay, particularly when you're talking about the legal system in government, whether it's valid or not, and issues of jurisdiction, if you are immediately or at any time launching into a rant about the Bible, you've lost. You have lost. The rational discussion is probably over at this point. I don't know why people would continue to insist on injecting the Bible into a legal discussion. Other than the only place that has any business whatsoever, I would guess, would be whether you're taking an oath in court. Whether it's gonna, you're gonna take an oath or an affirmation. But they're not actually quoting from the Bible. They're just, you're putting your hand on it. You don't have to even do that now. And it's been like that for quite a long time. And you can just take an affirmation. So, please, for any future calls, please save me the time if you call to try to prove me wrong on something that I'm discussing on the show, which is highly encouraged. It's always encouraged here. Please do not try to engage me in a discussion on the Bible. it has got nothing to do with the discussion. Some may say that the United States was founded on Christian principles. Well, the founders were very explicit that it was not. The fact that if we accept as a Christian principle, thou shalt not steal, okay? They're forcing everyone in the community to pay you qualifies as stealing in direct violation of the sacred writ. So, please, don't waste my time ever again, please. I'm not interested. It's nothing to the discussion. It just takes away from rational discussion, okay? It's just like saying it's okay to do X because of God. No, I've already done shows on that. Don't want to hear about it. Don't want to do it. Somebody left a comment on one of the YouTube, I think it was the 5 tips to help be more effective in court, and it had to do with not accepting the all caps name, and yet you're there as an attorney in fact on behalf of, and I don't know how many times we have to go through this. Why are people leaving these comments on my videos when I have gone at length to show how stupid and how irredeemably bad these arguments or claims really are? The all caps name, look, it comes down to, it doesn't matter what is in Black's Law Dictionary ultimately. It comes down to what they're actually doing. Does anybody have a single shred of evidence? And I've asked this 1,000 times already. No one can show a single shred of evidence that that is how they're actually operating. The idea that the all caps name is a corporation that they created. Look, if you create a corporation, there's a paper trail. Show me. Show me the paper trail. And no, just showing that the birth certificate is on a certain type of paper doesn't mean a corporation was created. They are not charging you that way. You have to deal with reality. They are charging you. Look, and I've got enough videos to show, to back this up. For this, we know how they're operating. I've asked them in and out of court, whether it's traffic or taxes or drugs, especially with taxes. I've always called the shames. I confronted the Chief Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court. This is how they're charging you. This is what they're actually doing. If you are physically in Arizona, they believe that their laws apply and that gives them jurisdiction. I have gone and done videos on this where we talk about jurisdiction is a power and authority to act as permitted by the Constitution, which is why something that goes outside their authority is unconstitutional. It's an overreach. It goes beyond what the Constitution allows them to do. That's the okay? We know that's how they're operating. Like I said, it's in the name, territorial jurisdiction. If you ask them, they will actually tell you that. It's in their documents. I provided documents from them. Do I have documents from every single one of them? No. But I've done it, in such a broad way from the United States and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England. It's the same thing. So I'm putting this out again. The number is 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020. Do you have any proof that is how they're charging you? That they're not charging the flesh and blood man. Ooh, the flesh and blood. They're actually charging a corporation. And that the police officer actually thinks he's charging a corporation and that he wants to trick you into accepting the liability for the corporation instead of acting as an administrator. Any evidence that is how they're actually charging you? You can ask the police officer that. You can ask the police officer that on cross-examination. Now, can they lie? Of course they can. Why am I spending time in this? Anyone, look, just please do me the favor if you're on YouTube and you're going to leave just don't leave any comments about the old camp's name. Let's put this one to rest. Do yourself a favor and do some critical analysis on it and look for the actual proof. So this is why when I do a consult and people ask me about this stuff. Well, what about what about should I use the old caps and do the minute? Do you have any proof that that's how they're charging you? I don't think there's anything to the all caps. I just don't see it. And I got more, I think I got a pretty good track record of getting things thrown out without having to address something so stupid. That's not how they're charging you. That's not the basis of their jurisdiction. That's not how they're doing it. How are they tricking people? Are they tricking people? Yeah, they're tricking people into thinking that they are a legitimate organization. Yeah, that they're tricking you. They have convinced enough people that they have a moral right to be immoral and unethical. Yes, that's where they're tricking you. They're not tricking you by getting you to accept liability for an artificial entity, which your name in all caps. That's just not true. We'll be back here on the No State Project in just a few moments to talk about more stupid Patriot-type arguments. And if you want to join me, it's 218-632-9399. 218-632-9399. Yes, welcome back to the No State Project here on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network. And live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona, talk about anarchy, government abuse, and defending yourself in court. Actually using logic and not just taking someone's word for it. It's actually shocking how, even people that seem to listen to the show will still not engage in any kind of critical thought and analysis and just throw this crap out. I got invited to do, it was supposed to be like a discussion or a debate on the issue of jurisdiction and the talk shoe thing should have been, the big red flag saying, don't do this. I wound up trying it anyway, and it didn't last too long. I have no problem with dissent and people disagreeing with me. In fact, the show is, the number is 218-632-9399. 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign. You can also get you on Skype at FrankRizzo3. Just instant message me first, of course. And it's just like one of the rules you got to have. It is a radio broadcast, and so you can't talk over each other. And certainly yelling and ranting is definitely, at least to me, a signal that rational discourse is over. And so I made the mistake, and it's been posted. I may post the link so you can, people can make up their own mind. Some Batman goes by the name of Batman, and that's what I was referencing. If your argument about the validity of government and whether it's a legitimate organization or not starts with the Bible, then I don't mean any offense to anybody, but that's a really piss poor argument. I mean, I've had Rusty Bowers here in Mesa, Arizona, try to justify that taxation, even though he couldn't justify with any facts showing that taxation was not theft. What he did was instead of trying to have a counter argument, all Rusty was able to do was say, well, Jesus taught that render unto Caesar what is Caesar. And that was the end of the discussion. There was no attempt whatsoever to actually counter my facts and my argument that they just, men and women that force us to pay them. And that's what we call theft. You can have outwardly, and you can feign that you have good intentions with the money that you're forcing someone to give you. That doesn't change the fundamental nature of the act. It's still unethical. It's still immoral, and it's wrong, and it's definitely damaging. So let's just say it's just as damaging, so that we don't have to trigger the people who think that there's no such thing as morality. It's definitely damaging. So that's objective, or as objective as you're going to get. Taking somebody's house away from them is objectively damaging. So to those, so that's why, again, we're not going to engage in any kind of discussion on even theological, religious kind of philosophy. We're gonna stay rooted in the world of reality, and we're going to talk about what facts, and we're going to use logic in order to make an argument, and we're going to use that same logic to be able to attack an argument. So trying to say that something is true because the Bible, no, that's just, it's just not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. If for those on the LRN Discord server, if you go to markstevens.net, go onto these success stories. I have years worth of documentation of just some of the cases of the complaints that we've had kicked out over the years. They've been, so I know you're probably new to hearing the show. So, I can't, I'll type in the link later if you need it. But we've had success not only all over the United States, for taxes, traffic, and drugs, and similar code violations, but also in Canada, in most of the provinces, in England, and in fact in England, we had costs awarded against the prosecution, which is like, a double win. We've had success in Ireland. We've had tax being thrown out in Germany, though I don't have the documentation, and we've had documented wins in Australia and New Zealand. And those are all documented. All the court documents are there. It's markstevens.net, one of these success stories. So getting back to the issue of jurisdiction, like I've already mentioned, when you're being charged, the foundation of the charge, whatever the code violation is always the same thing. And it doesn't change where you happen to be. It doesn't matter where it is. The only time it changes is at the federal level in the United States, where you don't have to physically be in the United States for them to charge you and claim jurisdiction over you. They claim jurisdiction over every square inch of the earth. Even space, they would claim jurisdiction, because they are the only ones that I'm aware of that claim a personal jurisdiction over everyone they claim to own. And so their claim of personal jurisdiction or in personam jurisdiction goes outside the United States. So if they consider you a citizen or resident of the United States and you're in Canada, they believe that they have jurisdiction to serve you process and force you back into the United States. So, but that particular jurisdiction is still based on the same principle of physical location, because at one point, why they believe that you're a citizen is because at some point they believe you were born physically in the United States. Therefore, they believe, okay, so it still stems from the same stupid claim. If you're physically in Arizona, our laws apply. Okay, now it's complete nonsense. It's just not true. But that's the basis of jurisdiction. It's not based on your consent. And this is something we went through yesterday. I wasn't even able to try to counter that, because he just wouldn't stop yelling. And, I think the best I was able to get out was, I'm going to have to go ahead and disagree with you there, but he was talking over me even at that point. So, I don't even know where to, the facts are just not there. So his claim was that jurisdiction, for them to have jurisdiction against you, you have to actually make a claim you have to make a claim. And then once you make a claim, you're consenting to jurisdiction because they need your consent. And I got to tell you, there's an awful lot of people sitting in prison right now that didn't give their consent. That you have to. It's such a bizarre claim to make that they can't prosecute you in a traffic case, for example, or a drug case, unless you make a claim and consent to jurisdiction. I can't. No. And it wasn't an opportunity to actually question him on this, because he just wouldn't stop ranting. And so, whoever this Batman Jr. guy is, they're welcome to call into the broadcast and we can hash this out live. But I do have I do have a mixing board for a reason, and I do have a mute button, and the reason is that it is a broadcast, and the point of the broadcast is to encourage rational discourse, and you can't do that if someone's yelling or talking over or not being responsive. So, the mixer is to, make sure that the few people that are listening to the broadcast don't turn it off. So we have to still, keep it going and have to be respectful. So, yes, I know. I've interrupted people. It's because I'm running a broadcast here and somebody may not be on point and I don't have the time. So occasionally I have to violate that rule. But generally I don't, and I'm okay, but they're welcome to call. And if you have evidence to show that's contrary to what I presented, that and I've been through it personally myself. Because this is the problem with these illogical things is when you start injecting logic and you start looking at it linearly, like a factual timeline. If you have to make a claim for them to have jurisdiction and that they have to have your consent, then that's basically an admission that when they first stop you, until you actually give them this alleged consent, they don't have jurisdiction, and what they're doing is a crime. No, it's not based on your consent. They don't give a damn about your name. They're going to prosecute. They'll put you in prison without a name. They'll just give you John Doe or Jane Doe. I don't care. Anyway, we're heading into the third of 3 hours of Anarchy Radio here on the Liberty Radio Network. If you want to join me, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 and a pound sign. Yes, welcome back to the No State Project, third of 3 hours of Anarchy Radio right here on the Liberty Radio Network, and I will have the podcast up commercial-free today on my YouTube channel since I could not stream there, but we'll still have the podcast there for you to check out. So it's a No State Project, and also be on my website, markstevens.net, talking about anarchy, government abuse, and defending yourself in court. And by anarchy, of course, we mean no rulers. Not no rules. We just want the rules, basically do no harm. We want to apply to everybody. Not have a ruling class that it does not. So you heard during the news there on LRN.FM that Acosta, who gave the sweetheart deal not just to Jeffrey Epstein, convicted child molester and trafficker, but they threw blanket immunity from prosecution to co-conspirators. Isn't that nice? Yeah. So it's not only good to be the king, it's good to be the king's men, it's also good to be the men who own the king. So, they were reporting here on LRN.FM that Congress was able to grill him about that, and I have not seen that, but I'm sure it was just evasions. That's all politicians tend to be able to do is evade. And if they lie, they get away with it. Jeff Sessions lied about his Russia contacts. Oh, because there's nothing there. I got a very persistent guy who thinks I'm an idiot because I believe in Russiagate. If there's nothing there, and it's not just Russia, I'd be damned if it wasn't also China. But if there was nothing there, why would Jeff Sessions lie to Congress about it? Why would Michael Flynn? Why would all these people connected to and Michael Cohen? Why would they all lie about it? So here you've got Jeff Sessions lie to Congress, gets away with it. Gets away with it. It's a felony, or it's a crime. Lie to Congress, perjury. Gets away with it. Not a damn thing. But I'll get back to that. I want to finish and discuss this about defending ourselves in court and how important it is. Because as I mentioned on the last show, and needs to be repeated, going into court and defending ourselves against these bureaucrats is a very serious issue and should not be taken lightly. It should not be viewed as fun, unless, of course, there's no chance of jail. There's always a risk there, though, for most of these things, and so if you've got a ticket and you're going to defend yourself, I think that's great, but don't do it recklessly. Don't just take for granted that somebody says on the internet. Someone Thursday was saying they refused to give consent, and the judge repeatedly said, "Sir, we need your consent." I don't believe that happened. I don't believe that that's true. I don't believe a judge in a traffic case or any kind of criminal prosecution is saying to the defendant, "We need your consent." That's just not how it works. Anybody who's been to court knows that is not how it works. So, if it is, you'd see a court case. You would see some kind of law, some kind of statute or something that says that the court cannot prosecute you without your consent. No, the only time it says that someone cannot be prosecuted without their consent is when you're dealing with a government entity, and it's called sovereign immunity. That's it. That's the only time I know of that consent, unless in some limited circumstances with DR, if they still do it that way. Domestic related, like a divorce. If you are claiming to be a government entity, then yeah, you may be able to show that your consent. Yeah, you have to waive your sovereign immunity. But as a plebe, one of the regular people, no judge is going. And so if someone says that that's true, give me a transcript. Give me an audio recording of that, of a judge in a criminal prosecution saying, "Sir, we need your consent to prosecute you." Or so, okay, or just the fact that they're asking for your consent so that they can proceed against you. They don't care. See what happened? This is not Ayn Rand, okay? This is not some fantasy 4-inch thick novel. You have to plead, or then I won't help you. You must. I won't. This is the real life. If you go in and you just try to pull that Ayn Rand crap, that you won't plead, they'll just plead for you. And they have jurisdiction or so-called authority to do that. It's not practicing law. Even if it is considered the practice of law, it's not wrong for them to do it. They have an exclusion if you are refusing to plead. This is basic common sense stuff. Apparently, too many people are going into this haphazardly and not preparing and not questioning what their defense is, or they're getting handed a defense and they're not questioning it. Where's the logic to this? Where has this been successful? I know what I do is unorthodox, but I've been very successful at it, and people, even more so, people have replicated what I've done, and I have I've got a years-long documentation to prove it. This is very serious. You can go to jail. Even going to jail for 30 days can ruin your life. You lose your job. You lose your home. Very easy to be homeless. All you have to do is throw your butt in jail for 90 days for asking a question. And we know that has happened. So question. Be a skeptic. It's BS. The idea that you have to consent for them to acquire jurisdiction, no. It's absolute garbage. And again, if somebody wants to come on the show and you want to show your evidence, I'm more than happy to receive it. 218-632-9399. Passcode is 2020. And when it comes to documents, please, for heaven's sakes, just scan them. I am in and out of Arizona twice a month, sometimes more. I might be in California for the whole summer. Don't mail me documents. Scan them and email them. You can't lose that, because I can pretty much guarantee if you mail it, I may not have it a day or two later. Why in the world would a group of people whose support is coerced, that they coerce the entire community to pay them and follow their rules, why in the world would they want or need your consent to punish you for violating rules you had no choice in to begin with? Doesn't that sound contradictory? Would you accept other contradictions? Jurisdiction's an issue of law. It requires no evidence to prove it's true. All they have to do is prove that you're physically in Arizona. That's a contradictory statement. Only an idiot would make a statement like that, expecting people to believe it. It's not true. It's contradictory on its face. It's ridiculous. The only reason why they get away with it is because they can, because they have guns, and they have a prison system, and they're willing to put you in it. So don't take even a traffic ticket lightly. It's very serious. You have to prepare for that. You have to know the basics. You have to know how to be able to challenge, which is not difficult. It just gets more difficult when your butt's on the line, when you're actually going into court. It's not difficult to get them to contradict themselves. It's not difficult to get them to sometimes even admit that they don't have the proof and that they'll actually argue they don't need it. So I love when you get these few critics talking about my position. They don't ever try to show that it's false. They just say that they don't need evidence. They don't need evidence. Oh, that's ridiculous. I say anybody who's making a claim against you and says they don't need evidence is a con man or just an idiot. So turn it around on them. This is one of the basic tactics I talk about on the show all the time. Turn it around. Can we argue and make arguments, valid arguments against somebody without evidence, without proof, without logic? No! Absolutely not. And yet, there are a lot of people out there that believe that because it comes from an authority figure. Well, Mark, of course the laws apply. Why? How? Where are the facts? Don't assume it's true. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, and it doesn't matter what the claim is or who's making it. But we'll be back with your calls in just a moment. Welcome back to the No State Project here on the Liberty Radio Network, LRN.FM, and it's, I guess it's 4:20 Mountain Time, so, yeah, do what you got to do, but keep listening to the big show, and you can join me at 218-632-9399. That's 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 and the pound sign, and Skype is FrankRizzo3, and instant message me first. Hell, we don't have any calls, so if you want to just call right in on Skype, that works too. It's getting to be that at that point. I'd have to continue about this ridiculous call that I had the other day. Somebody, Batman Jr., claiming that you have to make a claim and consent in order for them to prosecute you. And it's really sad. These things are taken serious. If you want to see, you can look at my videos that don't get much traction, understandably. You look at these. There's someone posted this on the Discord, which is, I thought it was hilarious. And people actually believe this stuff, where somebody goes into court. I think it's in Canada. Yeah, I'm pretty certain it's in Canada. And the judge, I guess he goes to recess or something, or he goes back in the chambers, but he does the customary curtsy or bow, and walks out of the courtroom. So the defendant yells out that he has abandoned the ship and says case dismissed. And people believe that was actually dismissed. And I had email contact with someone who claims to know this guy. Okay, so the veracity of this next section cannot. It's probably, I'm going to have to say it's unverifiable. But he says that obviously it was not dismissed. The judge did not dismiss it. He didn't abandon ship. He was standing on ground. He was indoors and on land. I think several hundred miles, away from the ocean. It was in a courtroom. So I guess this gets into some of that what's the guy, Jordan Maxwell crap, that everything is admiralty law, which no, it's not, and that everything has to do with admiralty, and that's why the ship, well, Mark, you give birth, and oh, come on. Learn some etymology, but it's not all. And let's just say it was. Let's just say that that all these statutes that they're charging you with were actually admiralty law. Really, admiralty law? They're really passing laws about trains, and that's admiralty law. Really. So automobiles, or motor vehicles as they call them, when they pass laws for statutes for driver's licenses or an operator's license of a motor vehicle that's used on a public highway. Yeah, I know rivers are public highways too, but for a motor vehicle, something with wheels, really? That's admiralty law? Why would they do that? Why? What is the purpose to say, well, we're just going to trick everyone and say this is admiralty law? And let's just say for a second, for sake of argument, that it is. What's the source of the admiralty law? The Constitution. Is there any evidence that the Constitution applies in the first place? No. So whether they're calling it admiralty, maritime, doesn't matter. It's easy enough just to question them on the facts or to point out that they don't have the facts. They haven't met their burden. That doesn't mean they're going to throw it out. Of course not. Be nice. But certainly something that comes out every time when you go, if they force it to trial, especially in cross-examination, where you get to ask the police officer those questions. Did you charge me on it? Is this an admiralty law? No? Oh. Damn. You got me. I mean, what are you supposed to do in a situation like that? Are you supposed to butt heads with the judge? They're saying it's not admiralty law. Well, Mark, they're lying. All right. I'll grant you that. That's why it's so important not to make such fallacious statements, or to make such arguments that are based on legal interpretation. You bear the burden of proof, tough guy. If you're claiming it's admiralty law, you have to prove that that's true. Remark, the burden's of proof's on them. Yeah, not when you make a claim. You and I make a claim, such as, if, like, for example, the one that most people are probably familiar with. If your defense is that you're claiming self-defense, you have to prove that. If you're claiming not guilty by reason of irresistible impulse or insanity, temporary insanity, you bear the burden of proving that. You have to actually prove that because you're making an affirmative statement. I think it's more effective. It's proven more effective. It's documented. I can document it. To just take the arguments that they're making. What is the argument that they're making? I've said it here so many times while we got new listeners. They're arguing that the laws apply because you're in Phoenix and you violated them. That's their claim. Is that too simplistic? No. That's the heart of it. That's the meat of what's really happening here. The laws apply and you violated them. That is their claim. Attack that. Because they're sure as hell probably going to get you on the facts. The facts that they have. Factually, you may have had pot. How do you, what are you going to do? You going to dispute those facts? No, you have to show that the facts don't show a public violation. So to have a public violation, the laws have to apply. I don't believe in assuming that. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's, well, yeah, the laws do apply. You got to prove it. You have a burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You're supposed to prove it. And we have not seen that happen yet. They can't. Arguing that you're right and you don't have to prove it doesn't meet the standard even of prima facie, let alone beyond a reasonable doubt. So does having marijuana in and of itself prove that you're guilty of violating the statute prohibiting marijuana? Just that fact alone, does that prove you're guilty of violating the code? I gotta go ahead and disagree with anyone who says that it does. Because it's a mala prohibita crime. It's only a crime by law. The law itself is literally an element of the charge. You cannot be guilty without it. Because there's two things going on. You either have, the one issue is, which is facts, you have pot. You had, let's say, a kilo of pot. The other is, did you violate the statute? And to violate the statute, you cannot cherry pick. By that I mean, you cannot leave the first part of the equation off. The laws apply, and you violated the law. I don't believe in making the assumption, and I defy anyone to try to rationally explain how you can prove something beyond a reasonable doubt when you start off literally with an assumption. We'll be back, and call the lines open, 218-632-9399. Passcode is 2020 on the pound sign, or Skype at FrankRizzo3. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. Listening to the No State Project, live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona. I'm your host, Mark Stevens. My website is markstevens.net. If you want to help support the show, you can do it there. Also, markstevens.sales.com. And for those, which is great, who are skeptical that we've had any success, there's documented proof on markstevens.net. And and yes, you go to success stories, there are going to be some posted, and I put this in the article that accompanies it. In some circumstances, yes, there are plausible explanations other than the one that I give. Only the dishonest among us would claim that there's only one explanation, and that's typical. What will happen if you see some of the comments that are on there? No, I don't delete them. They can be negative. That's fine. We're all, it's about dissent. It's about engaging in a rational discussion. The critics have one and only one explanation. They don't allow for another explanation. And that is your clue that you're dealing with somebody where the truth and having a more complete picture of reality is not their focus. Their focus is just to prove me wrong. But there are documented cases where the motion has been granted. Yes, some people want to argue that had nothing to do with the motion, that the motion was literally granted, signed and granted by a judge, but it had nothing to do with the actual motion. They were just upset at the prosecutor. Now, they offer no proof of this other than their own experience, which doesn't overcome the direct evidence. I mean, this is a matter of trying to have circumstantial evidence, something that's not even circumstantial evidence. They're trying to use inductive reasoning, like, well, based on my experience, that's not what happened here. But that doesn't overcome direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence does not overcome direct evidence. So you have to keep that in mind. But assumptions. If you want to see how the rules are not adhered to, just look at a tax prosecution. And I'm doing this not just to show why it's ridiculous, why we shouldn't be making these bad arguments, but it's also showing how easy it is to spot the bad arguments that are made by them, and now how it's much more effective for us to just point out that it's a bad argument. Now, Ashcroft versus Iqbal just restated a lot what was in the Twombly case, and this is Supreme Court. This is going back to 2007. Twombly, Bell Atlantic Corp versus Twombly, and it had to do with the basic principles for a complaint, and I believe that even though we're talking about civil here, since we're talking about prima facie, that the prima facie proof necessary to get past the pleading stage is the same whether it's civil or criminal. And prima facie means in the Latin at first glance. So this has to do with, do these facts, if taken as true, tend to show that the defendant is guilty? And that applies also to jurisdiction, because jurisdiction is personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. And they're based on the same exact thing. At bottom, if you're physically in Arizona, then the laws apply. Same thing. Subject matter and personal jurisdiction. Because they're alleging that you violated their code. So if you're physically in Arizona, the laws apply, and you violate. So what the Supreme Court is doing for the nth time is restating what the requirements are for a complaint. Now, this is supposed to apply to all civil complaints, but you're going to find this does not apply to the IRS, for example. And it's happened too many times, and there's too many examples of this. It is not up for reasonable dispute that this happens. Federal judges may act accordingly to the laws and the rules when it comes to a real crime like murder. But when the IRS files a civil action against you to enforce an IRS summons, I can guarantee you, and I can prove this, and I have done it at markstevens.net. I have the documents up there. Judge Leung is one of the offenders, just one, who was aiding Gerald Wilhelm get away with not complying with any of these rules. So our position is that they just made wild legal claims, frivolous legal claims with no evidence. And they actually argued they didn't need the evidence. They didn't need evidence. But the Supreme Court is saying, while a complaint attacked by a Rule 12b-6 motion to dismiss does not need detailed factual allegations, a plaintiff's obligation to provide the grounds of his entitlement to relief requires more than labels and conclusions, and a formulaic recitation of a cause of action's elements will not do. Factual allegations must be enough to raise a right to relief above the speculative level on the assumption that all of the complaint's allegations are true. Now, when you file a civil action against them, which is something that we're battling right now in Northern California, they ignore all your facts and sometimes even lie that you have facts, so that the court doesn't have to take as true your factual allegations. We have the agents actually admitting they had no evidence, but they ignore that. So when they file against you, though, they will always just make conclusory statements with no evidence at all. Well, we have jurisdiction. Based on what facts? Based on what facts? Again, in California, when this happened a number of years ago, Evan Moses was the agent, admitted having no evidence, admitting to not even being qualified to have made those legal conclusions. So here, not only did they not have, all they had was conclusory statements, and it says factual allegations must be enough to raise a right to relief above the speculative level on the assumption that all the complaint's allegations are true. But a formulaic recitation of a cause of action's elements will not do, right? More than labels and conclusions. You can't, okay, but the court refused to uphold that. The judge absolutely refused to acknowledge the facts. They refused to acknowledge our facts while at the same time refusing to uphold these principles, these laws, if you will. They refused to hold the IRS's lawyer to these rules, and at the same time turn around and try to use them against us. But to do that, they had to ignore the fact that we did have facts. We had a CD of the phone call and the agent's admissions. None of that's mentioned. And if you go to one of the critics' pages about me, they never mention that. And what they do is, outside the pleadings, they make an assumption for the judge and contradict. The judge said we had no facts. They didn't say what the critics try to do is say, well, the facts you raised were not material. They were irrelevant. Well, the agent actually, let me ask you, if the witness against you, who made the allegations against you, admits that he wasn't qualified to make such allegations against you, because the allegations are legal determinations. If the agent himself, the witness himself, says has no evidence and isn't qualified, you would have to be insane or just plain stupid to try to claim that that's not relevant. Those aren't relevant facts. So here the IRS is not held to any facts. We have evidence, we have facts, but they lie and say they're not there. And yet, we're supposed to believe that this is fair. And that I'm a con man for even suggesting making such challenges. We'll be back with the last segment of the big show here in just a few moments. Do not go anywhere. Yes, welcome back to the No Say Project. I'm your host, Mark Stevens, author of Government Indicted, which you can get at markstevens.net. And we're in the last segment of the big show, live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona, and talking about just how unfair how things are in court. One of the things I mentioned going into another break before was changing the context. I think we're at the federal level, and I've seen enough at the IRS. When the IRS attacks you with a summons, you're going to lose. You are going to lose. The courts are not going to rule against the IRS. They will not even pretend to apply the rules evenly to the IRS. and this is why I mentioned on the show the other day, where, you out of frustration, you figure, what do you need to do to knock these people out of the loop, so that, they're not just going through the motion, that it's your life that they're dealing with. Do you have to pick up a chair and hurl it across the courtroom so that you're charged with assault? So that you can get that black robe lawyer on the stand and get him, so that he's not in control anymore. So you can actually, this is my life here, these people, these lawyers playing God. Anything else, they're literally going through the motions. It's already done in advance. But at least when we're in these traffic cases, the drug cases, these lower level stuff, the state stuff, there's some adherence to the rules. Some. A good percentage of the time. Not always, of course. Of course, you get your Dick Nobles that just don't give a damn. You got these scumbags like the one, Ed Burke, that just retired a couple of years ago out in Keene, New Hampshire. Lying on video, which is great because you could do that in New Hampshire. Jurisdiction's a trial issue. Oh, I just wish somebody having that on video, that you could turn around and sue them. Have their own counsel tell you, this is turnabout. This is changing the context so that you try to get away with what they're doing. Boy, they'll snap you back to reality really fast. Without even realizing it, they'll express the rule to you. And now it's just a matter of, why doesn't it apply to the prosecutor? What kind of relationship do you have with this guy? How tight are you that you will blatantly allow him to get away with what you're threatening me for doing? This is what I love so much. I get that constant criticism. It's only from a handful of people. Jurisdiction, it doesn't have to be proven. It doesn't require evidence. The very foundation of someone's legal claim doesn't need evidence. Well, the courts disagree with you, at least on paper. Plaintiff's obligation to provide the grounds of his entitlement to relief requires more than labels and conclusions, and a formulaic recitation of a cause of action's elements will not do. Factual allegations must be enough to raise a right to relief above the speculative level, on the assumption that all the complaint's allegations are true. If that was actually applied to an IRS petition to enforce a summons, they would be laughed out of court. In fact, the judge who are supposed to be determining whether they're standing to proceed before they force someone to participate would sanction them. They don't. Why? Because they're on the same damn team. But Mark, judges hate paying taxes. They're rich. They're rich. Even if they hate the IRS is their collection agency. Yeah, I hate paying taxes, boy, but I'll tell you what, you know what I hate even more? If the IRS didn't collect my salary. What a stupid argument to make. Well, the judges don't like the IRS. What does that mean? They're not going to rule against them? Does that magically... It's just like when you have someone like Michael B. Thornton, who spent almost his entire career as a government lawyer for the Treasury Department, for the IRS, is suddenly going to shed that bias because he puts a robe on? No. It's just like prosecutors who are company men and women. They're going to shed their pro-state bias when they put that robe on, which a very large majority of judges are former prosecutors. That bias just magically disappears? Oh, just like their laws magically apply to us. It's all magic. Take it on faith, Mark. Take it on faith. After you exercise your faith, then it'll be... No. That which can be asserted without proof can be dismissed without proof. So, this is what we're up against when we're in court. And the turnabout really is effective. If if you really believe, if they are really true believers, even critics, if you really believe that the prosecutor can make a legal claim against you and not have any evidence, then why can't we make legal claims against the prosecutor without proof? It's basic principles of fairness. See, but and this goes to show why, how easy it is and why it's so effective to just stick to the facts and logic instead of coming out with these ridiculous stories. This nonsense, the name in all caps. This Alex Jones crap. Who Alex Jones admitted in a deposition he has a psychosis. The garbage that spews out of some people's mouths and is just eaten up. How somebody up in Canada can yell case dismissed and get hundreds of thousands of views and actually get people to do that and copy him. And the people doing it getting themselves in deeper and deeper trouble because someone on the internet posted it as if it was true and didn't take even 5 minutes of their time to try to critically analyze what was going on. Is this true? It's like when you look at the Mueller report, that there was no evidence of obstruction that was given by a guy who wrote a 19-page editorial that the president cannot legally obstruct justice. And you're supposed to accept that. You have to look at the context. The more context you have, the better understanding you'll have. You have to look at this guy. Barr is a career fixer. Iran-Contra. He was the guy behind the pardons. Why? Because the prosecutor was pushing on somebody that had dirt on George Bush. So you pardon him. So you got a guy who is put in place all political theater from a damn ruling class who who couldn't care less about you or I. And they do it right in front of you because they can, because we're not doing enough to stop it. A guy who doesn't believe the president can legally obstruct justice, so it didn't matter how much evidence there was. The evidence doesn't matter. Just like what happens to us when we go against the IRS. The evidence doesn't matter. Our evidence doesn't count, and they don't need evidence. 19 pages. He came out of retirement. This guy was long retired. Right out of the blue, writes a 19-page editorial that the president, well, if the president does it, it is not obstruction. You take your unitary executive crap and shove it. Please, give me a break, these war criminals. These people have more blood on their hands than a 19-page editorial that the president cannot commit obstruction of justice. So is anyone surprised that he actually wrote that there's no evidence of obstruction? He can't obstruct justice as president. He's literally above the law. I'm the law and order. I will restore law and order. To the plebes, to the people who get in his way. Literally hugging flags, humping the flag. This guy, and people just keep and just keep voting. Just keep voting at the federal level. Appreciate all the call. Well, I didn't get any calls, but I appreciate the support of the show. If you want to do so, it's markstevens@cells.com, and my website, of course, markstevens.net. I will be live on Wednesday. So till then, salud.